In this video, we're looking at UFC 301. I will give you my full card predictions for each one of these fights. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. In our main event this week, we have flyweight gold on the line. Alexandre Pantoja is fighting Steven Erceg. Steven Erceg in just his 4th UFC fight. He's had as improbable of a path to the belt as you'll ever find. He beats David Dvorak in his UFC debut as a pretty big underdog. But David Dvorak is on a 3-fight losing streak. After that, he picks up another decision win against Alessandro Costa, who's also on this card. Costa takes that fight on short notice, is currently 1-2 in the UFC. Now, the Australian's most recent win is probably his best win in his career. It was a knockout over Matt Schnell where he caught him with a clean left hook at the start of the 2nd round, put him out. Matt Schnell is a gamer. Matt Schnell always brings the fight, but Matt Schnell has been knocked out several times before. 6-6-1 in the UFC, has been finishing all 6 of those losses with 5 knockouts. Now, Erceg is winning these fights. You can't pick who you fight against, but now he takes as big a step up in competition as you might find when he fights Alexandre Pantoja. And Pantoja's been looking for somebody to defend this belt against, like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Why is he looking around so much? Because he's beating everybody. He's been at the top of the flyweight division longer than most people on MMA Twitter have been watching the sport. He has multiple wins over Brandon Moreno, multiple wins over Brandon Royval. He hasn't been finished in 32 professional fights, and this is a guy that can truly do it all. His jiu-jitsu is fantastic. He has decent power in his hands, an iron chin, and despite throwing what seems like everything in these strikes, he still has some left over in the 4th and 5th round. For a guy that muscle bound, throwing as hard as he does, you would think he'd be cooked by the end of the 3rd round, but you don't see that. You can see it in his face, you can see it in his body language that in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, yes, he is tired, but he's not going to let it bother him. It's like Nate the Train says, I don't negotiate with pain or fatigue. Pantoja embodies that, and we saw that in his last 2 fights. He kept a crazy pace in the 5th round against Brandon Royval, who's known for having good cardio, and we saw him take the 5th round off of Brandon Moreno. So Pantoja, been there, done that, minus 200 favor. He should get it done this week, but how? I'm stuck wondering how he wins this fight, because typically you look at a champion and you realize a pretty clear path to victory, but I don't think he has one this week. It's not to say that he can't win, but it doesn't seem like an open and shut case like a lot of champions defending their title. You've got Steven Erceg, who's great on the mat and can more than keep up with Pantoja down there. On the feet, I don't feel like either of them has a huge advantage over the other because both of them have that God-given durability. I think if anything, Steve Erceg might flow a little bit better on the feet and is more comfortable just touching Pantoja while Pantoja tends to load up a bit, but it's hard to argue with the loading up when you're having that much success. So it goes both ways. The biggest separator here potentially could be the cardio. We don't know what Erceg's going to look like in the 4th and 5th round, but these guys are also flyweights. I can't really remember the last time I saw a flyweight championship fight where somebody gassed hard in the later round. So I'm going to assume that the cardio is not going to be an issue for Steve Erceg, and he also doesn't fight like somebody who overexerts themselves in the early stages. So if we assume cardio is not going to be an issue, I don't see Pantoja having huge advantages over the 10th ranked 28-year-old UFC veteran of only 3 fights. I actually think there's a lot of value on the underdog here because just from a narrative standpoint, the flyweight division, the UFC, and the fans have so much to gain with a Steve Erceg win here. A new young champion in a division with plenty of exciting prospects like Muhammad Mokaev, Joshua Van, Asu Almabayev, Tatsuro Taira, to name a few. I think the stars are aligning here, and we're going to see some major changes in the division over the next couple of months to the next couple of years because you have Alexandre Pantoja, he's at the top right now. Deiveson Figueiredo is gone, he's at bantamweight now. Brandon Moreno's taking some time away from the sport. Alex Perez is fighting any and everybody who will sign the dotted line. And as far as technique goes in this championship fight, I think Steve Erceg matches up very well with Pantoja. I think he matches up physically very well with Pantoja, and I think he gives him a tough fight. I don't think he's going to look like a plus 170, plus 180 underdog in there. I think it's going to look like a pick'em. So these guys probably go to war. Pantoja's been to war a couple of times. Steve Erceg not as much, so he might be fresher, he might be cleaner. I'm going to take the younger man. I'm going to take the Aussie to get it done this week by decision and new. In our co-main event, we have Jonathan Martinez fighting Jose Aldo, the return of the... What is it? You have something to say? Well, Oscar, you're giggling over there. Tell me what you have to say. It's my outfit? You're gonna roast the way that I look right now? Okay, go ahead. Let me hear it. I look like an escort during times of feudalism. Okay, that's all right. You said I look like Fabio if his last name was Williams? Well, that one, I might keep that out. I look like Jesus if he turned water into General Tso's chicken. Now you're bugging. That's enough. The return of the King of Rio at the ripe age of 37 years old is upon us. It's a tough fight for both of these guys, Aldo and Martinez. You've got Aldo getting back into the swing of things when it comes to MMA. He spent the last year boxing as a pro, and if you watch those fights, you know that the hand speed is still there, the power's still there, the instincts are still there. While that was happening, Jonathan Martinez was winning fights in the UFC. He's now 10-3 in the UFC. He's carved out a nice spot for himself on the roster. He's on a 6-fight winning streak coming off of a leg kick TKO over Adrian Yanez, totally committed to that game plan. I'm not going to let Yanez start with his boxing. I'm just going to chop away at that lead leg. Yanez had no answer for it. Now in the fight before that, he fights Said Nurmagomedov, an awful decision in my opinion. I think Said Nurmagomedov won cleanly, should have won, but Jonathan Martinez gets his hand raised. And on the topic of decisions real quick, there were a lot of close ones last week. The winners were Mahashate, Dontel Mays, you've got Austin Hubbard, David Onama. They all won very close fights. I thought that Mays and Hubbard both lost their fights while I was watching it live, but let me know what you think in the comments. Were they good decisions? Were they robberies? Who got it right? Who got it wrong? Let me know what you think. But before the fight with Nurmagomedov, Martinez beat Cub Swanson with leg kicks. So people picking up back-to-back, or rather in a 3-fight span, leg kick TKOs, you never see that. He's one of the best leg kickers in the sport today, and the results are showing. And we should expect Jonathan Martinez to do the same thing to Jose Aldo, just try to chop at that leg as best as he can. But Jose Aldo, unlike Adrian Yanez, unlike Cub Swanson, he's going to check them. He's going to check them hard. He's going to check them with perfect technique. And once Aldo takes that leg kick away, it's probably going to turn into a boxing match because not many guys are able to take down Jose Aldo. Martinez probably doesn't even shoot for a takedown in this fight because he knows that he's dealing with some legendary takedown defense. So if he takes the leg kick away and they're just boxing, well, I assume the guy's been boxing for the last year and is the better fighter overall, is going to win, right? He's had better hands throughout his MMA career, coming off of an unbeaten year of professional boxing. I love Aldo in this fight. I think he cruises to a decision win because Jonathan Martinez has absolutely no stock to lose in a loss here. He'll certainly learn from the experience, spending time in there across from a legend like Jose Aldo, but give me the King of Rio to get it done on the scorecards. He lost the last time he was in Rio, but that was against Alexander the Great Volkanovski. I don't think that Jonathan Martinez is bringing those same problems, so give me Jose Aldo to win this fight by decision. Next, we're looking at a light heavyweight fight between Anthony Smith and Vitor Petrino. I will start with telling you a story from my childhood, a true story. When I was younger, a friend of mine and I were sitting on my front porch, and across the street there were two guys doing work on the house. I think it was the gutters or something. One guy was on the ladder, one guy was supporting the ladder at the bottom. They were two really big dudes, and the guy at the bottom of the ladder pulls out a full-size Snickers out of his pocket. It's already a wild thing to have in your pocket while you're working, but he pulls out a full-size Snicker and starts undoing the wrapper. The guy at the top, his spidey senses start tingling, so he turns around, he's like, "Hey, what do you got?" The guy goes, "I got a Snickers." And the guy on the top of the ladder goes, "Let me get some of that." And the guy with the Snickers looks at the Snickers bar. He looks at the guy at the top of the ladder. He looks at the Snickers bar again and eats it all in one shot. Why do I tell you this? Because in this scenario, Anthony Smith is the Snickers bar and Vitor Petrino is that hefty, hungry handyman. Petrino is a beast at 205 pounds, only 26 years old, and all the makings of being a future champion. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, we will be entering that Vitor Petrino era. He very well might be the most athletic guy in the division today. He's got decent enough cardio, crazy power in both of his hands, and he can wrestle. We saw him dominate Tyson Pedro in the 3rd round of his last fight with that wrestling, and before that he showed off some improved patience against Modestas Bukauskas. Didn't overextend, didn't fight at a crazy pace, waited for the right shot, and dropped him with a hook in the 2nd round. Even against Anton Turkalj, fought at a crazy pace, got reversed, got taken down, reversed Turkalj, got in a dominant position, got taken down again. It was ridiculous, but he found a way to go through it, and that's valuable experience for a guy like this. I feel like somebody with that much raw athleticism is going to have experiences in the octagon like that to learn from, and I think it's good that he's winning these fights that he's learning from. So we've seen him lean on the grappling, we've seen him display big power, we've seen him go a hard 15 minutes. Now on the other side, Anthony Smith is always game. He's still a top fighter in the division in my opinion. If you match him up with most guys outside of the top 10, especially outside of the top 15, he's going to beat them. His jiu-jitsu is still slick and dangerous. He's got power that's not going to leave him for as long as he competes, but he is going to be at a decided speed disadvantage and a decided strength disadvantage. On top of that, you look at his record, he has been through it, man. 37-19, and he's taken some beatings along the way. You've got a fresh guy on the other side. Vitor Petrino hasn't seen too much damage in his career. These two are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to damage taken in their career. You've seen Anthony Smith on the wrong side of some of the worst beatings you've ever seen. The Glover Teixeira fight was absurd. Johnny Walker was hurting him with everything he landed with. Khalil Roundtree rung that bell last time out. Petrino's undefeated. He's never been knocked down in the UFC. He hasn't really eaten that many strikes in these 4 fights that he's had in the promotion either. So I'll take the youth, the size, the speed, what I assume is going to be a future champion in the Brazilian. Give me Vitor Petrino to win this week by knockout. Vitor Petrino by knockout is going to be one of the props that we attack on the official betting article this week. Last week we had one of the best betting articles of the year, but we plan to keep that momentum rolling this week with with our pay-per-view. If you want the official betting article, you can grab yourself a total access package. That will include the DFS tools that you need as well, like the lineup optimizer, the data model, the projections, the DFS strategy guide. It will also give you access to the community forum as well. KunithMMA.com is by far the best way to support the channel. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Back to the breakdown. Next, we have another big Brazilian favorite here with Michel Pereira fighting Ihor Potieria. Middleweight Michel is a problem. He was already a problem at welterweight, but now he's fighting at his truer, more natural size, and the performances have only gotten better. Since his move up to middleweight, he finished Andre Petrosky in 66 seconds. He follows that up with a 61-second win over Michal Alexichuk, and it's clear that all of the advantages that he had over welterweights, the speed, the power, the footwork, the craftiness, he still enjoys all of that at 185 pounds, at least against the guys he's competed with so far. And that's interesting because you have a guy in Ihor Potieria who's actually coming down from 205. He fought at middleweight for the first time last time out, missed weight. So did he fight at middleweight or did he fight at whatever weight he wanted to? He started his UFC run at 205 pounds. He went 1-3 out of 4 fights. The one win was against the ghost of Shogun Rua, and the other 3 losses were all knockouts, but he did look great last time out against Robert Briszczek, who was making his UFC debut. Potieria just had more tools at range than his opponent last time out, and Robert Briszczek made his money outside of the UFC with a jab hook. Come to find out, that's all he brought to the UFC with him in his UFC debut. And really hats off to Potieria for that performance in that fight, because he fought like a man who had nothing to lose. He looked loose, flowy, didn't sit down on everything, only when he felt like he had the advantage and really wanted to, and he looked career best as a result, which is cool to see for a guy who had been struggling. But this is a different animal that he's against this week in Michel Pereira. He's not one-dimensional like Robert Briszczek. He's going to give Potieria a lot to think about. He's going to throw more kicks, he's going to look for more takedowns, throw the occasional Superman punch, the occasional wheel kick out there, and expect him to use his lateral footwork to pull Potieria into range. Michel Pereira is great at that. He's one of the few fighters that does a great job of leading the dance without being the advancing party. Like 2 trailer park girls round the outside is what he does, and he forces guys to follow him. And once you fall into that rhythm and you start following him, it's dealer's choice. He can shoot for a takedown, he can continue to stick and move, he can feint at you to give you a lot to think about, and because he can do everything so well and he does it so fast with so much power, you never know what's coming, which is largely why he's done so well in the UFC. An illegal knee lost in that fight against Diego Sanchez, and fighting like an idiot with the backflips and the cartwheels and all that garbage lost him his UFC debut against Tristan Connolly. Without those 2 things, without the illegal strike, with fighting a better game plan, there's a good chance that he would be 10-0 in the UFC right now, and conversations around Pereira would be completely different than they are currently. But he's a beast. He's the rightful favorite here. Take his knockout line if you want a better price, if you feel so inclined, but I'm going to take Michel Pereira to get it done inside the distance. I'm thinking 2nd round knockout. And real quick, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. Now, this next fight, we have Paul Craig versus Caio Borralho. The UFC is doing a great job of showing off their best Brazilian talent, at least here on the main card. There's obviously a lot of Brazilian fighters on the roster, but this main card is loaded with elite fighters, and I think that Caio Borralho is one of them. And if you've watched the channel for a while, you know that early on I was a non-believer. I was a naysayer. I thought Caio Borralho had a boring style, but when you watch that fight against Michal Alexichuk, that sealed it for me. It couldn't be denied anymore. It proved to me, which means nothing, but it proved to me that this guy could do everything, and he's possibly the best grappler in the division right now. Borralho, Brendan Allen, Fluffy Hernandez, those guys I think are in a league of their own at the top of 185 when it comes to the grapplers. But again, that fight with Michal Alexichuk showed just how dangerous he could be when he decides to let his hands go as well. You thought that was the path to victory for Michal, just strike with him, and he was getting outstruck cleanly. And I think that's what Borralho should do in this fight. He should do his best to keep it standing, because if he does, he's got a huge advantage over Paul Craig, and Paul Craig is a handful on the mat. You go down there with him, that gives him the best chance to win. But Caio Borralho, guy's got a neck tat. He's got a lot to prove. He's probably going to take him down to prove a point. Hey, I'm a better grappler than you. And Paul Craig has been tested at middleweight. Andre Muniz, Brendan Allen. Now he's got to fight Caio Borralho. He's probably going to fight Rodolfo Vieira after this. But I do think that Caio Borralho should try his best to keep this one standing, keep this one at range, because Paul Craig at this point in his career, and really at any point in his career, he doesn't offer that much on the feet. And I love me some Paul Craig, but I think the older he gets, the less of a chance he's actually going to be hurting these guys on the feet. I think that he's at a decided speed disadvantage disadvantage when it comes to the striking in this one, but it's also tough because he doesn't have great wrestling, and sometimes you get these guys who have great jiu-jitsu, great submission grappling, but they don't do a good job of getting the fight to the ground, and that's kind of where Paul Craig falls. He needs to pull guys down with him, pull them into his guard. Caio Borralho is probably going to follow him down there, but he's not going to submit Caio Borralho from guard. It's just not going to happen. I think if they do get on the mat, it's because Paul Craig pulls guard and Caio Borralho is not worried about it, or Borralho gets him down to the mat on his own terms and takes his back. Either way, I think it's very tough for Paul Craig to go against somebody who's younger, physically stronger, a better striker, a bit quicker, and is going to be just as good of a grappler. Last time we saw that, he fought Brendan Allen. No good. So give me the favorite here. Give me the Brazilian. Caio Borralho wins this fight. Paul Craig fights almost never go the distance, so I'm going to take Caio Borralho to win inside the distance. Next, we have a fight between Joanderson, Brito, and Jackie Shore. Jack Shore sounds like the name of somebody who would play center field for West Ham. Shore is fighting for the second time at featherweight. He was undefeated at bantamweight for years before he ran into Ricky Simone in a fight where Ricky Simone just took it to him. He out-wrestled him, he put a pace on him, he hurt him with his hands, submitted him in the second round. Since then, Jack Shore has committed to moving up to featherweight, and he's going to stay there. And he made his UFC debut in that weight class just over a year ago against Makwan Amirkhani in the most Makwan Amirkhani fight you've ever seen. Amirkhani wins the first round, dominant, takes him down, does whatever he wants, clean wrestling, whatever. That's Amirkhani. Second round, he's not there anymore. He gasses out, Jack Shore finishes him in the second round, classic Makwan. But now Shore's looking to make it 2-0 in this division, but he's got a tough task on his hands this week with Joanderson Brito. Brito's on a 4-fight winning streak after dropping his UFC debut to Bill Algeo in a fight that he did slow down, he did get tired, he got stuck on the feet. Clearly there is a path to victory for him here, and Jack Shore could win this fight if he follows that same kind of game plan. But last time out, we saw Joanderson Brito submit Jonathan Pierce after being flat on his back just seconds prior. We saw him run through Weston Wilson as expected. The guy's probably not UFC caliber, unfortunately. We saw him take down and submit Lucas Alexander with no problem, and he knocked out Andre Fili in just under a minute. The dude's a powerhouse. Everything he throws is with bad intentions. Every time he grapples, it's with all of his might. And for those reasons, I do see him beating Jack Shore. Jack Shore is 17-1, shiny record. Even in the UFC, 6-1, shiny record. Those 6 wins, none of those guys fight in the UFC anymore. The only guy that he has faced who is currently on the UFC roster is Ricky Simone. Ricky Simone was too much for him. I think Joanderson Brito is bigger, faster, stronger version of Ricky Simone, probably going to be too much for him as well. I don't think Brito is going to waste any time here. There will be no feeling out process. I think he's going to close distance and let his hands go right away. I think he hurts Jack Shore early in the first round. And Shore has made his money with his wrestling, so if he tries to take Joanderson Brito down, which is possible, you can take Joanderson Brito down. We saw JSP do it. But even then, he'll find himself in some trouble because Brito does have that submission game. So I wouldn't be surprised if either way, knockout or submission. We saw a quick night at the office for Brito. I'm not going to give you the inside the distance line though, because I'm more confident on one side. Give me Joanderson Brito to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Iasmin Lucindo and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Iasmin Lucindo has looked dominant in her last 2 fights. She finished Poliana Viana in the second round with an arm triangle. In that fight, like the one prior, she showed off that grappling ability. Most of the fight was spent on the mat. Poliana Viana is dangerous down there, but she took it to her, was in a dominant position, was able to get the submission in the second round again. She defended takedowns, got takedowns of her own, beat a decent grappler, very good learning experience. Before that, she looked like she was teaching a class against Brogan Walker in a fight that I think, and I think everybody watching, knew that she could have finished at any point. What I like for her, however, is that she didn't finish the fight. It looked like she wanted to get those minutes in there. She probably realized pretty early on, like everybody watching, that there's no way I lose. So why not get the minutes under my belt, the UFC experience, the cage time? Why not do that? Because it's going to serve me well in the future. And I think that was the right move. Now on the other side, you have Karolina Kowalkiewicz, longtime vet, has challenged for the title, has faced top flight competition, former champions. She's seen it all. So massive experience edge for her. And she's coming in with a lot of momentum. She's riding a 4-fight winning streak where she's looked better than ever. We saw her dominate Felice Herrig with her wrestling. She beat Silvana Gomez Juarez also with her wrestling. She lit up Vanessa Demopoulos, did the same thing to Diana Belbizia, did that in back-to-back fights. And for Karolina at 38 years old, she looks like she's having a lot of fun out there, and as a result, she's fighting her best. Now, Iasmin Lucindo, 22 years old, 16-year age gap. The bigger the age gap, the more likely the younger fighter is to win. But we have never seen Iasmin Lucindo fight somebody this experienced. Iasmin Lucindo feels like a bit of a trap, and we could be looking at this through Jim Miller tinted glasses, if you will, where you're looking at the results like, wow, they're fighting really well, but it is against bad competition. So You take the good with the bad. Jim Miller was on fire, but then he came across somebody like Bobby Green and got lit up. So it's tough, but in this fight, I do think that there's serious value on the underdog because, again, you have Lucindo, 22 years old, fighting on a pay-per-view card in Brazil. So lots of energy, lots of emotion. She's going to be looking for takedowns in this one as well, but she might not be able to get them. Karolina's got decent takedown defense. Now, can Lucindo have a competitive fight on the feet? Of course, she can strike just as well as Karolina, but Karolina is going to be cleaner. She's going to throw a lot more volume, and as a result, she might win more minutes. In her last 2 fights, her output has been insane. These are significant strikes, not just total strikes, but ones that are counted as significant. She's averaging 140. If this fight goes 3 rounds and most of it is on the feet, there's no way that Iasmin Lucindo keeps up with that pace. No way. And for Lucindo to be a minus 400 favorite, this is the kind of line that she had against Brogan Walker, and Brogan Walker might be the worst UFC fighter of all time. Shout out CM Punk. Iasmin Lucindo, very young, coming off of back-to-back wins, decent momentum, decent amount of hype as well. You can see that on the betting line, but her wins are against Brogan Walker and Polyana Viana. Polyana Viana has never beaten anybody in the UFC that has a winning record in the promotion. Karolina Kowalkiewicz has a win over Rose Namajunas. She's gone the distance with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Alexa Grasso, Yan Xiaonan. The level of competition these two have faced couldn't be any different. So I see Karolina Kowalkiewicz putting on a veteran performance this week, fighting at a pace that Lucindo struggles to keep up with. I expect her to get her hand raised. So give me the experience, the output, the takedown defense. Give me Karolina Kowalkiewicz to win this fight by decision, and you could take the round line. And when I say round line, I mean you could take Karolina Kowalkiewicz plus 3.5 because she probably wins 1 round of this fight. That's what we did for Austin Hubbard last week. He ended up winning the fight, so cool. We should have just took the money line, but it doesn't matter. I think that Karolina wins by decision. Next, we have a fight between Elves, Brener, and Myktybek Orolbai. That Y is working hard as a vowel right there, as you can see. And this is a tough fight in my opinion. You have Elves Brener, who has had a great run in the UFC, 3 up, 3 down, 3 fights in the UFC, 3 wins. He starts with a split decision over Zubair Tukhugov with what I thought was a bad decision, but whatever. He wins the fight. He follows that up with a come from behind knockout win over Guram Kutateladze, where he was a huge underdog. But in that fight, he weathered the storm early, stuck with it, and really put a pace on Guram in the 3rd round and was able to get him out of there. He cashes as a plus 475 dog in that fight. After that, he knocks out Kenan Kraszewski in the 1st round. So 3 up, 3 down. Elves Brenner's looking good. Brener has shown decent takedown defense, good cardio, solid power in his hands throughout his short UFC run. Now on the other side though, Orolbai is coming off of a dominant win over Uros Medic. He wrestled Medic to death, took the doctor down over and over again. Once he got his hands on him, there was no separation to be had, not in the 1st round, not in the 2nd round. He ends up getting to Medic's back up against the fence and just slaps on a neck crank, not even a choke. Looked like he was going to rip Medic's head off. Medic had no other choice but to tap. Even when he tapped, you saw just after, he was just shaking his head like, damn. The guy's got good wrestling. He's going to be able to do that to a lot of people. One thing that stands out to me about the Medic fight though, for the few seconds in the 1st round that they were on the feet, Orolbai was getting lit up. Medic was hurting him in those first few seconds at range. The body kick was there all day. He was hurting him with the hands. It looked like he was going to get him out of there early in that one. It looked like he was going to pick up a quick win finish. And to me, because he's so wrestling heavy and because of what he looked like in the first few seconds against Medic, who I know is very sharp on the feet, I don't think that Orolbai has anything to offer at range. His wrestling is what makes him a problem. So if Brener could keep this fight standing, I think that he lights Orolbai up the same way that we saw Medic do in the first few seconds. Brener has to let his hands go, and he's got to keep that pace. It's really just going to come down to if he can keep Orolbai off of him, because if he can, I think that he wins this fight pretty cleanly. I think there's also a situation where Orolbai does everything that he wants in the 1st round. He takes Brener down, gets up, remats him, gets up, remats him. That can also happen in the 2nd round as well. That's a lot of energy expenditure because we know that Elves Brenner's still going to be there in the 3rd round. He's one of these shoot to box Diego Lima guys who you have to kill. They just make him scrappy there. And I think that Brenner's not going to stop coming at you until that final belt. So in the 3rd round, you might have a nice live betting spot because Orolbai is probably going to look dominant through the first 2. You might get Brener at plus 600 odds going into the 3rd round, and then he comes from behind and wins with a late knockout. Not just because we saw it against Guram, but because of that pace that Orolbai fights with. You even saw after Uros Medic tapped, it looked like Orolbai was gassed. Like he was taking huge breaths, and yeah, you can relax. The fight is over. I get that, but he looked very, very tired. And this is a guy who has finished most of his fights. Elves Brenner's never been finished. And Brenner's been making his money with his hands, but most of his wins are by submission. Granted, they are arm bars from earlier in his career. He probably doesn't arm bar Orolbai, but I wouldn't put it past them to at least look for submissions to make things a bit bit uncomfortable. I think the line is too wide. I think there's value on the dog. I expect to see another knockout win from the Junkyard Dog late in this fight because we're making it out of the favela with this one. Give me Elves Brener to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Gene Silva and William Gomis. I'm not surprised to see Gene Silva as the favorite here. When you make your debut in dominant fashion the way that he did, people are going to look at you and say, hey, if I could put money on that guy, I'm going to do it. He was also a minus 1,200 favorite in his UFC debut, which should tell you everything you need to know about Weston Wilson, but here we are. Now, what I like for Gene Silva is that he fights out of a good camp. He's got tons of power in his hands, tons of confidence in that power, and he allows it to work for him by being aggressive. And he can carry that late into these fights. We saw in the Contender Series him look good in the second and third round after possibly dropping round one. But one thing that I noticed on that Contender Series fight is that he keeps his hands very low, but he's still eating body shots. He's still eating kicks to the body specifically, even though his hands are right there. The confidence in one's power is a double-edged sword because on one hand, yeah, you know when you land, you're going to hurt the guy you're fighting, but on the other hand, defensively, you're leaving some openings. And that's really tough against the guy in William Gomis because William Gomis is, as long as you will find at the weight class, very smooth footwork, very light on the feet, and can sometimes be very boring to watch. But his style works for him. He knows how to win minutes. He knows how to win these fights, and that's worked for him throughout his career. He throws really good kicks, especially to the body with that Sonda style, and that should be his main weapon of choice this week because we've seen Gene Silva get lit up to the body before. Now, I could see Gomis avoiding some of these heavy strikes from Silva just while touching him up, keep moving, touching him up for as long as the fight goes on. He'll do that forever. He's very patient. I also think that Gomis can wrestle here if he wants to, and to me, Silva seems like the kind of guy who will get frustrated by something like that. He wants to put on a show. He wants to get the knockout. He wants to bark and do all that stuff, which is cool. We like that, and he's a much more exciting fighter than William Gomis, but I think that Gomis' style could mess with his head a little bit. William Gomis is the kind of guy who will stand and bounce in front of you, and it will feel like nothing is happening, and that could be the case this week, and the crowd starts booing. Silva starts throwing big strikes to try to close the distance, just to have something to hang his hat on, just to have one seminal blow, just to get himself going that way, and he might just run out of patience as a result, leaves himself open, gets caught with strikes, gets taken down. William Gomis is a fantastic fight manager, for as lame as that is to watch. So I see him winning more minutes. I see him outlanding Gene Silva, not because he's going to throw volume, but because he's going to avoid the shots, he's going to stick and move, and I think that he's going to win the fight because of that. So give me William Gomis to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight with Drakkar Klose and Joaquim Silva. I think that Drakkar Klose is just going to be a bit too much for him. Drakkar Klose is somebody who's extremely underrated in my opinion. This is a guy who can do absolutely everything. He can wrestle effectively, he can strike effectively, he's very accurate with his strikes, and I think he's an intelligent fighter. Joaquim Silva's a strong, powerful guy, lands heavier, he's probably got the heavier hands out of the two of these guys, but he's got a grossly negative striking differential. He whiffs on a lot of punches, and he can be taken down and controlled. We've seen that before. We saw Clay Guida take him down multiple times, we saw Arman Tsarukyan take him down multiple times and finish him in the third round. He did have that moment against Arman Tsarukyan, but even then, lands heavy, lands the best strike of the fight, and then just doesn't follow up. He let that one slip, and I don't think that Drakkar Klose is somebody who's going to let a whole lot of fights slip, albeit he did let the fight against Beneil Dariush slip, but that's the past, whatever. But I think that Drakkar Klose is just going to be a lot cleaner. I think he's going to take him down effectively, and I think he's just going to win more minutes. Drakkar Klose is 8-2 in the UFC with a lot more quality wins than we've seen out of Joaquim Silva. I think Drakkar Klose is better everywhere outside of just pure jiu-jitsu, so for that reason, I expect him to win this fight. He probably wins by decision. He's had some finishes in his most recent fights, but he's not a finisher. He's a decision machine. I think he gets back to that, moves to 9-2 in the promotion. Give me Drakkar Klose on the scorecards. Give me Klose to win by decision. Next, we have a fight between Mauricio Huffy. He's fighting Jamie Mullarkey in his UFC debut this week. I know a lot of people are on Huffy. I get it. And I hate to be a chalk donkey and just follow the crowd here. It's not what I'm doing, but it is what I'm doing. And to me, it's more so a bet against Jamie Mullarkey than it is for Huffy. Huffy's got big power. You don't get called one shot for nothing. He wins his fights by knockout. He won by knockout on Contender Series, and he carries that power late into these fights. But Jamie Mullarkey, no chin left at all. Nasrat Haqparast beat him cleanly early in the first round, knocked him down multiple times, and Haqparast doesn't really do that. We picked Haqparast that day for the same same reasons that we're picking Huffy. It's just I don't trust Jamie Mullarkey, especially with his chin. And at this point in Mullarkey's career, he's 5-5 in the UFC, but I thought the John McDessie decision wasn't a great one, and he definitely lost against Michael Johnson. Realistically, Jamie Mullarkey should be 3-7 in the promotion, and his wins have been over Kama Worthy, who's not in the UFC anymore, Devontae Smith, who's not in the UFC anymore, at least I don't think. I don't know if he even fights anymore. And then Francisco Prado, who made his UFC debut on short notice at 21 years old, and he just laid on him. He held on for dear life against Francisco Prado, goes the distance with him. So I've been very unimpressed with Jamie Mullarkey as of late, and I know it sounds like I'm piling on here, but I just don't think he's somebody that you should be putting your hard-earned on. He's not that great. I think the UFC future for Huffy is bright. I think he's going to knock a ton of people out, and I think he starts with a knockout this week over Jamie Mullarkey, who's coming off of a pretty bad knockout loss of his own. So give me the power, give me the debutant, give me Mauricio Huffy to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Diani Barbosa. She's fighting Ernesta Kerekatse this week. It's a striker versus grappler matchup, and we've talked about this on the channel. In these women's fights, striker versus grappler, you should be taking the striker, right? At least we floated that idea. I don't know if that theory has really held up all that well as of late, but Kerekatse is going to be able to win this fight if it is standing. She's taller, she's longer, she's the better striker. The problem is, if you go back and watch some regional footage, she was put on her back by lesser grapplers than Barbosa, and I think that is the biggest difference here. Both of them are coming off of wins on Contender Series, but they were two very different performances. Ernesta goes to war with somebody who's probably not UFC caliber, wins a split decision. Barbosa wins in the first round with a submission. Not only did she win by submission, but she kept looking for submissions, and I think that is going to be the biggest difference maker once these two get on the mat, because again, she's at a size disadvantage. Yes, length, height, size disadvantage, but everybody's the same size on the floor. Based on the way that these two have looked so far, I think that Barbosa only needs one takedown to win this fight, while Ernesta needs to win 15 minutes of the fight, and I don't think that she keeps her feet for that long. Barbosa's fought the higher level competition outside of the UFC with a win over Karine Silva, who looks like a world beater right now, 4-0 in the promotion. So give me Barbosa to win this fight. I think she gets the takedown that she needs. I think she gets the submission probably in the first round. Give me Barbosa to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight between Ismael Bonfim and Vince from Hell Pichel. I feel like this is a buy low spot for Bonfim despite him being a big favorite. Gets the doors blown off him by Benoit Saint Denis, and that's going to happen to a lot of people. Benoit Saint Denis is very, very good. But what Bonfim has going for him in this fight is he's going to be much faster on the feet, a lot more explosive, a lot physically stronger, 13 years younger. And this isn't like a Lucindo Karolina situation where you've got a huge age gap, but one of them is really young. Bonfim's been doing this, 28 years old, in his fighting prime. Vince Pichel is 10 years removed from his prime. And the Achilles heel for Vince Pichel throughout his career has been his takedown defense. He has horrible takedown defense. Good get-up game, horrible takedown defense. And that get-up game is starting to leave him a bit. We saw against Mark Madsen, he just couldn't get up. He resorted to chirping him. He was talking trash from bottom position because his body wouldn't let him up, so maybe his voice would, maybe his words would. But no, he gets taken down, held down, loses rounds because he can't get back to his feet. We saw Austin Hubbard take him down 4 times. Jim Miller took him down several times. Roosevelt Roberts took him down. Bonfim does have takedowns. We saw him secure a takedown on his Contender Series fight. We saw him take down Terrence McKinney at one point. And Terrence McKinney, you can say what you want about him, but the guy is a decent wrestler. So for him to take down Terrence McKinney, I think is a big feather in his cap. But I see him looking to right the ship this week. He probably feels embarrassed after that last performance against Benoit Saint Denis. So he's going to come out there. He's going to fight the way that he fights, just at 100 miles per hour to start. Does he gas through the first 2? Maybe. Vince Pichel is a hard guy to put away. So if Bonfim doesn't get him out of there early, I think there's a good chance of us getting a nice hard round out of Vince from Hell Pichel. But I still think that Bonfim is going to do enough through those first 2 and survive the 3rd round. I like the speed. I like the youth. I like the takedown upside that he has. I think that Ismael Bonfim wins more minutes, wins the rounds. I think that Bonfim wins this fight by decision. Lastly, we have a fight between Alessandro Costa and Kevin Borjas. Costa, again, he's 1-2 in the promotion. We talked about that at the top of the video. It's tough because he's also fought a guy who could end up being the champion by the end of this card, and he fought Amir Albazi in a fight that he lost. Amir Albazi's ranked 3rd in the world. But what does Costa have going for him? Well, he hits very hard. He can look for takedowns as well, and I think he's physically much stronger than Kevin Kevin Borjas. Now, what does Kevin Borjas have going for him? Well, he can fight at a strong pace, although we saw him fade last time against Joshua Van, which is extremely concerning at 125 pounds. You don't see many flyweights fading the way that he did. Not a good look. But what you get out of Borjas is what you get out of a lot of guys coming out of Peru. And I don't know if Enrique Barzola just etched this in my mind, but you always think of guys that are going to give you a hard 15 minutes. They're going to be tough. They might not have the most spectacular technique. They might be generalists, if you will, but they're always going to give you a good fight. And I think that Kevin Borjas is cut from that same cloth, but I think Alessandro Costa is the better fighter overall. I think that he has got more power where Borjas might have better volume. I think that he's got better takedowns where Borjas just wants to keep the fight standing. And because he has more ways to win this fight, I think that he's going to win this fight. Borjas is a fun guy who they should put in there with strikers who are coming into the division, but I don't think he's somebody who's going to win a ton of fights in the UFC and climb the rankings. Well, I think Costa has the potential to do that, even though he's had a rocky start to his career. So give me the Brazilian to get the Brazilians off on the right foot to start the card. I think Alessandro Costa wins this fight, likely by decision. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I'll see you later in the week for final picks. Let's go.